Welcome to the Miller Report Real Clear Journalism. I'm Maggie Miller. Today we're diving into investigative journalist Lee Fang's latest expose for Real Clear Investigations, where he uncovers the hidden mechanics behind Kamala Harris's Brat Summer campaign. According to newly revealed internal documents and WhatsApp messages from Democratic strategists, a large-scale influencer campaign was quietly funded by Democratic billionaires through a group called Way to Win. Their goal? To shape social media narratives in Harris's favor without voters knowing who was footing the bill. Way to Win reportedly spent over $9.1 million on social media influencers, orchestrating a wave of TikToks, Instagram posts, and YouTube videos. This content strategically aligned Harris with the viral brat aesthetic popularized by pop artist Charli XCX's album, transforming her from prosecutor into a cultural phenomenon. But this was more than just a trend. It was a meticulously crafted marketing strategy. Way to Win provided influencers with talking points, issue areas, and key phrases to ensure that pro-Harris content dominated digital platforms. This approach blurred the line between organic support and paid promotion, raising ethical concerns about transparency in political campaigning. What's most concerning is how these funds were structured. Way to Win funneled money through nonprofits, which then paid the influencer talent agencies. The result? No direct records of these payments in the Federal Election Commission disclosures. Unlike TV and radio ads, social media influencer content doesn't require financial disclosure, making this an unregulated frontier in political campaigning. And while Democrats have led the charge with this unprecedented spending, Republicans too have tapped into influencer marketing, though at a significantly smaller scale. We are joined now by the lead investigator on this story, Lee Fang. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So the fact that this content was funded doesn't necessarily mean that the enthusiasm wasn't real. Many influencers wouldn't promote a candidate that they didn't support, but how do you balance recognizing organic enthusiasm with the impact of financial incentives?
Well, that's a very good question. This influencer effort, it was about $10 million. It had a couple of different buckets. There were some sketches and YouTube shows, podcasts that were financed by this effort. There was no disclosure that there was funding from this Democratic group. So that's one issue that, these are like basically long sponsored ads that wouldn't have existed without this funding. And there's another bucket of Democratic partisans, and indeed, these are folks who probably would have posted on their own volition, but they received some guidance, talking points. There's a lot of hand-holding about how to get messages across. And then there was a third bucket. These were folks who were explicitly chosen because they're not political. These were mommy bloggers, fitness bloggers, people who do kind of cooking Instagram or TikTok shows, who were non-political creators. And they were chosen because these were folks who could insert pro-Kamala, pro-Democratic messages to a different audience. And I think it's very unlikely that these folks would have been posting Democratic partisan content if it were not for the money here.
So being on TikTok at the time, I did notice a flood of pro-Kamala content coming out. Was this a truly successful way to reach voters? And was there evidence to support that this would work?
Well, look, it's kind of hard to prove causation. There's a lot of factors that go into why people vote, and scrolling TikTok might have been, it might have made sense as a strategy. But you look at the kind of targeted demographics here. There was a really overt attempt to shape young voters, Gen Z voters, Black men, Latino voters, and these are the core constituency groups that Kamala lost. It was a historic election. Democrats lost these key constituency groups really in an unprecedented way. All of the groups I just mentioned drifting towards the Donald Trump camp. It's not clear if it was how much of influence these TikTok messages had. Some of the channels that they helped sponsor and fund had very few views, so it's hard to argue that that had much of an impact. But the big top line kind of takeaway is that this was a cataclysmic election for Democrats, and none of these strategies seem to move the dial.
So this whole thing raises ethical concerns about transparency in political campaigning. Should there be stricter disclosure requirements imposed on influencers for influencer-based political content?
Look, we've had rules for decades now where, if you sponsor a billboard, a radio ad, a television ad, the last few seconds of that message has to show who sponsored it. On the billboard, there's a disclosure at the bottom, which PAC or campaign sponsored that message. No such rules exist for social media, for these influencers on Instagram, TikTok, and what have you. It's really the Wild West. At the end of 2023, the Federal Election Commission proposed some influencer payola disclosures. They deadlocked on the issue. There was no movement. So right now, really anything could happen. And we're seeing this problem more and more on both sides. Both Republicans and Democrats have kind of got caught doing this. This particular story that we're reporting this week, this is the biggest, I think, effort of this type on either side. Democrats spending $10 million just in this one kind of organization. But it's a big problem, and it's a big problem for disclosure. We haven't really resolved it.
Anything else you'd like to add on what kind of scrutiny should be applied to the intersection of social media and electoral politics, ensuring fair and ethical campaigning?
Yeah, I think some type of disclosure is necessary just for trust, for understanding where the money's coming from. It really kind of degrades the public discourse if you have bloggers and influencers constantly getting paid on either side, and you're seeing accusations of this from both the right and the left. But I think this could be all cleared up very quickly by just having some simple disclosure. We already have some FTC rules on payola in terms of products. Why not for political messages?
Well, obviously, you did a lot of investigating for this piece. Is there anything you'd like to leave people with?
Well, just be careful about those messages out there when you're scrolling your phone and seeing your favorite influencers imploring you to act or vote a certain way. Just remember, they don't have to disclose. There's a possibility that there's money behind the message.
Well, let's hope that maybe this gets resolved before the next election. They got a couple of years to get things in order.
That's right. Thanks so much for having me, Maggie.
Thank you so much for joining me, Lee. I'm Maggie Miller. This has been the Miller Report.